What up, guys? What up? What up? I am Lou. So in this video, this is part 3 of our reoccurring video of the text search app, right, that we've been working on. So first video, check it out. We end up building just the script that takes 2 arguments. You can run it from the terminal. Second video, we'll put a face to it, right? Build a UI using Flask. This third video, what we're going to do, we're going to compile it now to an EXE file. So we're going to use PyInstaller. So we kind of walk through the process, show you how to do that so it could become an executable file. Alright guys, before we get started, if you could give me a like, give me a follow, man, I appreciate it, guys. Again, give me a like, give me a follow, appreciate it. Let's get started, guys. Alright, let's go ahead and get PyInstaller installed. So let's do pip install PyInstaller. Error, cannot install package due to OS invalid argument. So this says pip installer 5.2, and that may be the issue because I believe for Windows it needs to be, well, it says 4.4 or later, which should work. So let's try older version, like, I don't know, let's try the 4.4 version. Oops. Okay, so we do need to install the older version of Windows on Mac, which is where I tested this out. It works fine with the newer PyInstaller version. For Windows, you gotta use the older version of PyInstaller. So kind of keep in mind, depending on what your OS. If you're using Windows 11, you may have to. All right, cool. So now that I have that installed, I'm going to do a pip freeze. So if we take a look at that, we'll see pip. All right. All right, cool. I mean, PyInstaller. Yep. So all of that's in here. All of that's good. Cool. All right. So really, the only thing that's pretty straightforward with this is going to be make this a bit bigger. It's really straightforward, man. So the command, now that we have it installed, is going to be PyInstaller, and then we're going to call our app. That's it. PyInstaller, and then we're going to call our app.py file. So as the run is doing its build, we'll see 2 files that will get generated: a build file and a distribution file. Oh, we got an error. What happened here? Alright, so based on the error here, we have a no module boot locate error, right? So this is going to be I did some research over it. This is more so related to the OS version, I believe. Well, let me rephrase it. The Python version that we're using. Not the OS, but the Python version. So I believe I'm using Python 10 maybe. If you're using Python 7, Python 8, maybe even Python 9, it may not be a problem. So go ahead and try doing PyInstaller app. If it works fine for you, then you're good. But if you get this error message, what you're going to have to do is include a exclude module. So ultimately, we want to tell it to exclude the boot locate. So let's go ahead and run it now by excluding it, and this time it should compile successfully. So let's see if it compiles successfully. Boom, it's good. Yep, it's good. So I did not have this issue on Mac, but I did on Windows. But at the same time, I don't think I have Python 10 on my Mac, 3.10. I believe I have 3.9 maybe. Either way, just if you have that issue, that's ultimately one way to resolve it, right? To exclude it. So now that I have that compiled, one thing you'll see, and we'll see over here on the side, we have a build and a distribution folder. So let me go to this project. So see how we have our build and our dis. Inside our dis folder, we have our app. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call it what it really should be. I'm going to call it text finder app. All right. So when I come into it, the next thing is we have our app file here. Which is fine. You can leave it as app. So one thing to keep in mind as we create, so as the process is completed and we have our .exe file in here. So let me kind of go to properties. See, we have a .exe. So it's app.exe. And ultimately, there's some under dependencies, right? Some DDLs and so on that's needed in order for everything to run. But one thing that's missing here that it did not get included is our HTML file. So what we need to do there is go to our templates, copy that folder, the templates folder. Let's go back to our dis, our app folder, and then we're going to paste. So we're going to paste that in here. Once we do that, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my app.exe file. Double click, boom, and it's running. So do keep in mind, see where it says development server, do not use in production. So the reason why we're getting that message is if we look back, see how we put debug equal true. If you make that false, then it's going to be considered as, production. But because we, tagged it as true, it's telling us that it's still development. I would recommend leave it as true, more so because if you get error messages, it will actually show you on the browser what the error messages are. So let me go back. So this is the actual app, right? So keep in mind when you run the app.exe file, what it's doing, it's starting a service, a web service. And just like any other web service, we have a our URL, right? We have our IP address, which is this is a, if you're not familiar with 127.0.0.1, that is a local, that think of it as your local IP address for your machine and your machine only, which nobody else can access. And then of course here our port. The way to do it, just go ahead and click on it, do a control, then click. Then what happens is it would open up in the browser. And here you go, right? Here's the IP and the port. So now let's go ahead and as we do stuff in here, you'll see things happen here, right? Like we did a get request, which gave us back this page. So now let's do a search, right? Same thing like earlier. We're going to do Canon, the same folder that we were looking at earlier, and I'm going to hit submit. As you can see back here in the back, we see a post, and then of course we get a return of all of our findings. So in this case, it found 8 matches, where it told us found total 8 matches. Let's say we find something that does not exist, right? Because we haven't done that yet. As you can tell, no results, no text value found. And of course you see all the activity going on here, back here in the back. So if I go back to the URL, it's a get request, boom, everything's cleared out, back to normal again. So again, guys, this is a way to kind of run something. I wanted it to stick with a web app in this case, but still it's only running locally. We have access to our directory paths, things of that nature, which is what we need, which kind of actually gives us more access than a traditional web app that's actually being hosted on a machine. Because a traditional web app that's published and hosted on a server somewhere, if we were to run this kind of command, it's not finding it on your actual PC. What it would do is try to find, scan the directory on the server, which is not what we want, right? In this case, because it's running locally and it's on a local machine, we actually have access to our local resources, the local directory, so we're able to do all of that by just adding a nice clean UI and display it properly and so on. Again, this is a nice beginning setup. There's things that we could easily do to make it look cleaner, maybe even fine tune it. For example, let's say we have too many hits, we could only display the top 10 or top 100. We could do things of that nature. But nevertheless, though, it wasn't too bad to compile the application. And again, it's a web app as well. And ultimately, once you're done, just kill it, right? This terminal, just close it out. So if I try to refresh, as you could tell, it's just loading and loading. Boom, it can't be reached because I killed it. There's nothing's running. And now if I want to rerun it, I could just kind of go back and let me start it up again. As I start it up, I come back to my browser, hit refresh. There we go. Right? So that's kind of what we did here. Again, guys, hopefully this helps out. And this is part 3 of our series of this text, search text finder app that we created. And again, we walked through the process. We created a script that you could easily pass in arguments to do, so you don't need a UI, just run it. We end up putting a UI face to it using Flask. And then, of course, this part 3 is we compiled it. So now you could share the file. So kind of, if you want to share it, the goal would be to go ahead and compress the file, and then you could just package it and ship it out to whoever you want to ship it out to. And then they'll have access to it. Keep in mind, I compiled this app on Windows, which means if you're going to be sharing this file with a Linux user or a Mac user, you need to compile it on that operating system. Okay. Also, when it comes to Windows, if you happen to compile this app and you're doing it on a 32-bit Windows system, which Windows 11, I believe, is strictly 64. Windows 10 is 64. I don't think there's any 32-bit. But again, if you're using old Windows XP, for example, or some kind of older version of Windows where you do have 32-bit and 64-bit, just keep that in mind. If you compiled the app in 32-bit, you cannot run it on 64-bit machine. Oh, my bad. Let me rephrase it. If you compile the app in a 64-bit machine, you cannot share it with somebody that had a 32-bit machine. So keep that in mind, right? So that does matter. Hopefully, it shouldn't be an issue nowadays, but it can be an issue. And same thing with Linux and Mac. Compiling that operating system, then you could compress it and share it with other users. So what I'm going to do on this one is I'll probably add this to when I publish everything to my GitHub account. I may leave the compressed version for Windows, and then I do have another version for Mac because I end up testing this out on my Mac machine, and I may add that later to the GitHub account as well. So anybody who just wants to go ahead and use it, it's good to go. Again, guys, hopefully this helps. Give me a like, give me a follow, and more videos to come. Peace.